I view Tantra and Kundalini Yoga as pathways of energetic mastery. The work that I'm interested in doing is this deep inner self-work, and it's about removing blocks and harnessing the fullness of your life force energy and ultimately transcending your limitations so that you can be of service, step into your brightest potential, and have this experience of oneness with the divine. We do need to learn to transmute and harness our sexual life force energy as part of this pathway. It's unavoidable, it's inescapable. This energy is there, it is dormant, it is waiting for you to turn it on and plug it in. Why I advocate for learning and practicing these tools, if you're a leader or an entrepreneur or a creative or anyone who's got big goals and visions for yourself and you want to step into your fullest potential, it's such a profound pathway for that. I'm Madeline Eliza. Join me to explore female power, embodied leadership, sensuality and spirituality as we weave together ancient and modern, the scientific and the mythic, the erotic and the divine. Hi everyone, welcome to the show. Today is a deep dive into the world of Tantra. What is it? Why have I been drawn to this path? We're going to unpack why Tantra is not all about sex and do a little bit of myth busting. That's a very common misconception. And also look at its relevancy and potency as a path of spiritual development and personal growth for entrepreneurs, for leaders, for creatives, really for anybody who's wanting to overcome these internal blocks and limitations and achieve their fullest, brightest potential. It's an incredibly powerful, beautiful, ancient spiritual tradition, which unfortunately has become kind of distorted in the perception of many people in the West nowadays. When I say Tantra, I notice that people get a bit nervous and uncomfortable when I say I'm studying Tantra, I'm practicing Tantra. And I think there's a misconception that it's all about the Kama Sutra and kinky sex and polyamory and going to orgy parties and something like that. That's not what it's about at all, at least not in my experience. That's not why I'm drawn to this path. That's not my embodied experience of practice and study on this path at all. So I just want to pull this all apart in detail and really share my love for this beautiful tradition. We're going to look at the way this overlaps with the practice of unblocking and elevating your kundalini energy, how kundalini yoga fits into this, which is another practice that I study and teach. And I want to share how this fits into the world of leadership and entrepreneurship and how you can use these tools to your advantage. So I became curious to study Tantra when I'd been working as a leader in quite high-powered C-level roles, often alongside very alpha men, where the language of power was masculine, and where I felt that in order to hold my place and wield power in that domain, I had to do it by putting on this suit of masculine armor. And it was not authentic, and it was not actually empowering for me, because it was like this armor but with a hollowness inside, because the power wasn't coming from within my own body. There was a fundamental disconnect with my own sexual energy, which is our life force energy. And Tantra is not all about sex, but you can't study and practice Tantra without having a reckoning with your own sexual life force energy, because this is the energetic force that we're working with within our own bodies. It's actually got nothing to do with exchanging that energy with anybody else, unless some branches of Tantra do teach those practices. But the journey that I have been on is a journey into the self and a journey of communion with the divine, and learning how to harness and cultivate and build and channel my own life force energy so that I can show up as my fullest, brightest expression in this world and clear the blocks out of the way to have this experience of oneness with the all of everything, in a nutshell. So I was drawn to Tantra because I had a sense that I needed to unblock this energy within myself. Like my core power was hidden inside a shell of shame and fear and judgment, like I have to be the good girl and I can't touch that. And at the same time, I was trying to wield my power in this way that's actually very exhausting. When your power is not from this endlessly replenishing inner well of light, and instead it's something you're trying to posture from the outside, it's very draining. When you learn to switch on, it's like plugging yourself into the power socket inside your own body. And you'll notice, oh, you can't see my hands here, but all of these actions where I'm like, plug yourself in and switch yourself on. My hands are all around my sacral chakra, like around my womb space, because for me, that's where the power source is. When you plug yourself in and switch yourself on from that place, from your own internal well of energy, you're not indefensible. Sure, we're all human, but there's a sense of incredible power and a sense of being rock solid, standing on your own 2 feet, like a sense of being unshakable, because this is coming from inside of you. Nobody can touch it. Nobody can take it. It's yours. And it's also God's. It's like this beautiful divine power source. So that's what's drawn me to Tantra, is this kind of, and I'm a very intuitive, I follow my intuition a lot, but it's this intuition that like there's something I need to switch on within myself in order to feel fully, deeply empowered in an embodied, authentic way. So that's what's drawn me onto this path. If we look at this big question of what is Tantra, I find a lot of very esteemed spiritual teachers will avoid answering that question directly. And if somebody else tries to offer an explanation, it can be met with, oh, that's not Tantra. But there's no continuing, this is Tantra. It's hard to summarize it in a nutshell, because this is an ancient, like a centuries old spiritual path and practice that has come, it's predominantly from India, but also Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, like around that region of South Asia. This is where it's originated. And there are many different overlapping lineages. There are different branches that have sprung off from this. There's overlapping with Buddhism. There's overlap with Hinduism, with the different goddesses, these kind of Indian goddesses that feed through the Tantric traditions. There's a lot of parallels with Taoism, which comes from China, which is a different path, but there's lots of similarities. So it can be kind of hard to get a handle on. And to offer a soundbite snapshot, Tantra is da 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 da. I'm going to start by offering a definition. Tantra means woven together. And just like yoga means to yoke, most of us are familiar with that definition if we've been on this yogic path for a while. And in fact, yoga, Tantra, and Ayurveda are 3 sister sciences. They go together. I've been practicing yoga for about 20 years. It's been a really big part of my journey. So Tantra feels like a natural evolution of that. And really the weaving together that Tantra speaks to is the weaving together of the physical plane and the spiritual plane. A lot of spiritual paths teach to kind of transcend the body and transcend the mind and step into these higher realms of consciousness. Tantra is a pathway of understanding consciousness and making sense of consciousness that reckons with the brain and the body. And this is one of the things that I love about it. It's not some ascetic path where you're supposed to just sit in a cave and deny your desires, deny your shadows. No, it's like a practice for the householder, for the everyday person. It's not a practice only for gurus and sages who are off living in a cave or a monastery. It's a practice that everyday people can use for their own benefit. So, and I am offering my interpretation of Tantra based on the training and the study that I have done and my own embodied experience of these practices. I'm not offering you a perfect definition. I'm not offering you a complete definition. I'm offering you a perspective, which, is an informed perspective, but it is my perspective and it's my interpretation. Some of the concepts that I'm going to share are my own, like the way that I have synthesized different ideas coming through. So when we talk about weaving together, I actually think of this as being like a matrix. And on the vertical axis of the matrix, you have the weaving together of the physical world and the spiritual plane, of darkness and of light. And I'm making this motion with my hand because Tantra is a path of descent in order to ascend or transcend. Ultimately, the goal is to like open the crown chakra and experience these higher states of consciousness, of oneness with the divine and with the all of everything. But we can't do that without doing this first. And this is why working with the body and working with our darkness and our shadows and our desires is so fundamentally important on this path. It's a gritty path. Like, it's not this beautiful love and light spiritual practice. Like, we can get to those places, but you got to do the descent first. And it's very empowering when we like lift all of those rocks inside of ourselves. We come to a place of truth and true acceptance and true self-love. And I think that's a very beautiful aspect of this pathway. So if we're looking at this matrix, on the vertical, you've got physical, spiritual, dark, light. And then on the horizontal axis of this kind of matrix where we're weaving different polarities together, we've got the masculine and the feminine. And this is fundamental to Tantra, this understanding of Shiva Shakti energies. The masculine is the stillness, the single point of consciousness, the experiencer. And Shakti is the all of everything, life force energy. Shakti is the experience. And we learn to balance those energies within ourselves. We learn to honor those energies within the other as well. I talk about feminism a lot because I believe we're failing to honor these energetic polarities a lot of the time within the men in our lives. So it's all interrelated. But yeah, I find that visual helpful. It's like weaving together these polarities. And we talk about polarity in Tantra like masculine and feminine, or a polarity where they're at two ends of a continuum with shades of grey in the middle. Same with the physical and the spiritual and the dark and the light. It's a path of non-dualism. So polarity, where we work with the poles, with the two ends of the spectrum, is different from duality, where we say this or that, good or bad, dark or light. It's a path of non-dualism. We try to avoid dualistic thinking, and I really recommend avoiding dualistic thinking wherever you can. In my last episode about the Trump election, we unpacked this a little bit. If you haven't had a listen, you might want to check that out. But this kind of very self-righteous posturing that we get on the left and the right, but it was very evident in the left in the wake of that election. Like, anybody who voted for Donald Trump is wrong and stupid or evil. Like, it's not helpful. It's not accurate. It's not how life is. We don't live in a black and white world. So Tantra is a path of exploring polarities, particularly the polarity between the masculine and feminine. Like, we work with these energies a lot, but it's a path of non-dualism where we try to avoid thinking in dualities. And there's a lot of, when we talk about tantric embodiment practices, there's a lot of shadow work involved because we're doing this descent to ascend, right? Like, we're looking at inner child work, there's a lot of overlaps with Jungian like shadow work. There's beautiful interplay there. We're also looking at the darker aspects of our desires. And this is where this idea of sexual energy comes into it. In the school where I've been studying Tantra, we were taught that sacred sexuality is like 5% of the teachings of Tantra. And it's beautiful. Like, once you have the ability to cultivate and kind of master your own energy, what could be more beautiful than going to exchange that with somebody who has the same baseline understanding and mastery of their own energy, and you can create this beautiful sacred container of intimacy together. Like, what could be more beautiful than that? But that's only a small fraction of the teachings. And whilst it's only a small fraction of the teachings, like the physical actualized expression of your sexual energy in intimacy with another person, learning to use your sexual energy is fundamental to Tantra. And the analogy that we were given is that sex is not the cake that you're cooking with Tantra. Like, the cake is about understanding your own consciousness and connecting with the divine and self-actualization. But your sexual energy is like the pots and the pans that you're cooking with, because this is your life force energy. If we bring in the concept of kundalini, You may be familiar with the idea of kundalini. It's visualized as a serpent coiled at the base of the spine. This is your sexual energy. This is your life force energy. This is your creative energy. This is your power. And for many people, this snake can lie dormant for your whole life. For our whole lives, it can just lie there because we haven't developed these tools to turn it on and to allow it to rise. Because for that energy to rise, there's a lot of unblocking and unlearning and removal of distortions that need to get out of the way for that energy to rise up the central channel of the body. We work with the chakras a lot. We work with breath a lot. And we work with movement as well. And this understanding of kundalini is what has taken me to study and practice kundalini yoga, which is really all about that process of like releasing this energy and allowing it to ascend up the central channel of the body so that we can have this experience of opening to the divine. I want to talk a little bit about kundalini yoga because it is a little bit controversial as well. But before we do that, I'm going to take a step backwards and offer some different perspectives of Tantra. And these are like 4 different types of Tantra, I suppose, or 4 different lineages, which are viewed with different colors to distinguish them. And before I say this, I will offer that as I've been doing research for this episode, I've stumbled across some very esteemed spiritual teachers who have said, oh, this idea of different colors of Tantra is just a modern distortion. It's not part of the original teachings. It's not true Tantra. But then they've failed to explain what true Tantra actually is. And I have found explaining Tantra in these terms really helpful for people to get a grasp on why, when I talk about Tantra, I'm not talking about polyamorous sex parties. I think something that can happen with spirituality is that we get onto this path and it's this huge, rich, diffuse pathway with lots of different teachers and lots of different ideals that have come into it along the way. It's hard to get a handle on it. And if we're a seeker, or I'm a seeker, I'm not a guru, there can be a tendency to sit back and go, oh, well, I don't know everything. Like, I didn't write the book on this, so I shouldn't speak about it. But I think when we are coming from a place of being relatively well informed and having pure intentions, I think it can be helpful to share different frameworks, even if they're not perfect, even if this idea of different colors of Tantra wasn't something that was spoken about in the ancient texts 2,000 years ago. If it's something that can help people in this modern Instagram world to actually get a handle on these teachings and start to apply them meaningfully into their own lives, then I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think if the teachings are shared with purity of heart and intention, even if it's imperfect, even if there's kind of distortions that happen along the way, isn't that better than these teachings being locked and held only by a chosen few who have to go and live in a cave in India for a year with a guru in order to absorb them? Like, it's not practical for your everyday person. And there's so much power in these teachings that I think, and what I'm going to share are these different colors of Tantra, which, as I've said, is more of a modern perspective. But I think it's a framework that's helpful and helps to differentiate between what we've come to understand as Tantra, like Tantric sex, Kama Sutra, rah, 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 and actual historical classical Tantra, which is a path of purity and devotion and connection to the divine. So the colors of Tantra, if we're to look at this framework, white Tantra is this more pure path. It's a very spiritual path. It involves a lot of meditation. This is a fundamental component of all Tantric teachings, is the importance of meditation and stilling the mind. It's a path of learning to work with this energy, but really to draw that energy up the central channel of your own body. Like, it is within the vessel of your own body. You are contained in that. It is not about exchanging sexual energy with other people. It is a path of purity and devotion to the divine. And this is the end goal, is this kind of communion with the divine. So this is white Tantra. This is a very quick overview. Then we have red Tantra. And red Tantra is when I say Tantra and people get nervous and embarrassed and think that I'm at sex parties every weekend. This is red Tantra. This is neo-Tantra. And neo-Tantra was brought to the West by Osho in the 70s. And this is where the teachings of Tantra really spread in the West. And this is why so many people have a distorted perspective on it, because there was a big focus on cultivating that sexual energy and then spreading it and sharing it outwards. Like there's a focus on the sacred sexuality practices, not necessarily just with one partner at a time or at all. And this is where this idea of Tantra as being all about kinky sex parties has really spread from. But that's just one, and that is one expression of Tantric energy. And it can be beautiful, and I'm not in any judgment of that, but I just need to be clear when I talk about Tantra, that is not the path that I'm on. And I think you can gain a lot of beautiful insight into yourself on that path as well. But the work that I'm interested in doing is this deep inner self-work, and it's about removing blocks and harnessing the fullness of your life force energy and ultimately transcending your limitations so that you can be of service, step into your brightest potential, and have this experience of oneness with the divine. This is white Tantric. Red Tantric is more about sexual energy. This is neo-Tantra, brought to the West by Osho. Then there's pink Tantra, which is a bit of a blend of these two. And this is where there might be a focus less on sex parties and really spreading your energy around, and more on having a beautiful sacred sexuality connection of intimacy with one partner. It's more to do with the heart, the pink Tantra. And it's kind of a combination of those two paths, of the very meditative, pure white path and the more expressive red path. The fourth color, when we look at this framework, is black Tantra. And this is the realm of black magic, manifestation, sex magic, these kinds of things, which again, I'm not saying any path is good or bad, but when I talk about Tantra, what has called me is this white path of inner self-work. Okay, so this brings me on to a discussion of kundalini yoga. Now, kundalini energy is this concept of the serpent coiled at the base of the spine, which through meditation, breathwork, embodiment practices, we can unlock and ascend up the spinal, up the central channel of the body, through the chakras, up to the crown chakra, where we come into this space of connection with the divine. This is an ancient concept that's been around for centuries. This is kundalini. Kundalini yoga, the correct technical term is kundalini yoga as taught by Yogi Bhajan. And it combines Kriya Yoga, which comes again from that South Asian region, with some aspects of Tantra. And Yogi Bhajan was the man who brought these traditions to the West again in the 70s and 80s, and he branded it. So the Kundalini Yoga that I'm studying as a teacher is Yogi Bhajan's brand. And again, I think a lot of people, and he's a very controversial figure. If you do a Google search, you'll find out lots of different information about Yogi Bhajan. Again, I think we can throw the baby out with the bathwater in wanting to be very purist. And I can see that this is a pathway where one man has put his brand on these ancient traditions, and it's his take, and it's not perfect, and it's filtered, and I'm sure it's distorted, but it's still managed to spread these very powerful teachings to so many millions of people in the West who would otherwise never have experienced it. So I like to take the good with the bad. I don't believe that anyone is all good or all bad. It's non-dualism, right? And personally, the practice of Kundalini Yoga has been profoundly transformative for me in my relation to my own energy and my breath and my body and my connection with everyone and everything else. So I really love it as a practice, and it kind of takes a lot of the concepts of Tantra and brings it down into the body. It's like a physical practice that you can do daily to embed these teachings and to learn to cultivate this energy. It's very, very powerful. I view Tantra and Kundalini Yoga as pathways of energetic mastery. These are paths to clear mind-body blocks, to kind of come to terms with our own shadows and our own darkness and our own desires, and arrive at a place where we're really comfortable and accepting of ourselves. And we also have the opportunity to come into this more spiritual place where we feel a sense of connection and grace. And it's very beautiful when you can get to this place. We do need to learn to transmute and harness our sexual life force energy as part of this pathway. It's unavoidable. It's inescapable. This energy is there. It is dormant. It is waiting for you to turn it on and plug it in. It does not mean that you need to start going to sex parties, but just the practice of cultivating this energy in your own body can be such a powerful tool to unlock the fullness of your power and expression. So that is my take on Tantra and Kundalini Yoga, and why I advocate for learning and practicing these tools. If you're a leader or an entrepreneur or a creative or anyone who's got big goals and visions for yourself and you want to step into your fullest potential, it's such a profound pathway for that. I wanted to share this concept, which is in one of the prayers that we do for Kundalini Yoga in our morning sadhana, and it's this concept of the soul bride, and it speaks to this connection with the divine and also the polarity of masculine, feminine. So the concept of the soul bride is it's the urge to merge, right? Like the human soul is it's like a bride waiting in her room and if you look at the divine is like, that's what we're waiting for, and it's this yearning to be taken and to be met, and that yearning for connection. This is the idea of the soul bride. A lot of Kundalini practice is about ascent, like bringing this energy up, and this is the soul bride is coming up, up, up. But actually what we're preparing ourselves for, and we are opening ourselves and inviting in the descent of the divine. And you can interpret this in whatever way you want. You might have your own relationship with God, depending on your own religious or spiritual practices. But it's a very beautiful visual of like bringing yourself, your truth, your essence up and opening yourself for union with the divine. And in my mind, which is very immersed in understanding of polarity and masculine and feminine energetics, and this is why I say this is my interpretation of Tantra and Kundalini, but I can see two kind of different ways we can look at that from a polarity perspective, which might be helpful for you in cementing this concept. So the soul bride, in a way, is the feminine. If we look at the self as it's this practice of rising and opening and receptivity, like the bride, like I'm waiting, I'm here, I'm ready to receive you. This is a very feminine embodiment practice of softening, opening, trusting, and receiving and surrendering, right? And a lot of what we need to do on this spiritual path, and I've really experienced this as well, we work with the darkness, sure, and we release and we express and we explore and we don't hide from it and we go there. But as well as, and often after, working with the darkness, as that soul bride ascends, we need to develop our capacity to hold light. And I listened to a podcast the other day which talked talking about something different, but the phrase a tsunami of light for this current moment of human history, like there's a tsunami of light coming. And this, I think, is what it feels like when we open ourselves and we experience this descent of the divine and this sense of union, this sense of connectedness and oneness and grace and beauty in our lives. And it is a lot to hold when we've been operating at the level of the smaller self and the mind and stuck in fear and shame and everything. There's a real practice in not only learning to ascend your energy up that central channel of the body, but also to build the nervous system capacity to be able to hold the light, journey through the darkness and learn to hold the light of that descent of the divine. So when you look at it from this perspective, the soul bride, the self, is the feminine pole, and the divine, the descending, penetrating divine, is the masculine. Like it's penetrating and we need to be able to hold it and receive it. We can flip it and look at it from another perspective. As I mentioned at the start of this episode, when we look at Shiva Shakti, Shiva is the oneness, the consciousness, stillness, the experiencer, like the one having the experience. And Shakti is the experience. Shakti is the all of everything, life force, energy, like the matter. So from this perspective, if we look at the ascent, and this is all my own interpretation of this, by the way, so, love to hear your thoughts. The ascent of the soul, the self, you could view that as penetrative as well, like bringing the self up, the experiencer, in order to experience the divine. And it's this single point of consciousness having this kind of celestial experience of the all of everything. And in that way, the self is more penetrating upwards. And it is that space of divinity that is receiving us in the more feminine pole. So I offer that, I think, because the soul bride concept as a feminine construct really resonates with me, because I'm a very feminine identified being. I'm deeply immersed in feminine embodiment practices of opening and surrender and da-da-da. And I think if you're more masculine identified, then that sense of like the penetrating self, the penetrating consciousness might be more resonant. And of course, we each have those polarities within the self as well. And it's a really helpful practice, I think, to play with those, to play with placing our awareness in our feminine pole and placing our awareness in our masculine pole within our own bodies, because it gives us a more well-rounded experience of our own consciousness. That went down a very deep rabbit hole. I'm going to move on from that concept of the soul bride here. I just really wanted to take the time in this episode to unpack what Tantra is, what it means to me, what it has to do with Kundalini yoga, why it's not all about sex, and hopefully that's become a little bit more clear, and also why I favor Tantra as a tool. I feel really excited about bringing these practices to the corporate world, to be honest, because I find I've posted a couple of things on LinkedIn about the work that I'm doing, and it's like a stone dropping, like silence. And I know that people feel embarrassed and uncomfortable, but there's no need to, because it's actually just such a beautiful path of self-discovery and self-actualization. And I offer this work, so I wanted to share that as well as part of this. If you're interested in going deeper in this, I have a background of 10 plus years working in close partnership with founders and CEOs in high growth online businesses. That's been my bread and butter. I can help you with this if you have a business that you are wanting to get off the ground, or you are wanting to scale, or you're wanting to pivot, fine-tune your product, your marketing, your operations, streamline things, get yourself set up right so that you can scale. That has been the crux of the work that I do for a decade. So I'm now taking on clients in this space. And if you're interested, just send me a message or an email and we can set up a free strategy call to look at how I might be able to help you. I have a few different packages there depending on the size of your business, whether you're in like startup mode or more scale up, because the challenges are different, whether you're just getting something off the ground or it's growing fast and you're experiencing growing pains. I've worked in both realms and offer different services to suit. So details are on my website, madelineeliza.com, or just send me a message if you want to learn more. And as I said, we can set up a free call to explore how I might be able to help you. The other work that I do offer, because I've been so immersed in learning and practicing leadership, and this self-work as part of that, as your business grows, you have to grow as well. This is the great gift and challenge of leadership, is that you have to keep shedding your skins to keep up with the business that you're leading and that you want to lead. And these embodiment practices of Tantra and learning how to work with your Kundalini energy are so helpful if you're wanting to overcome your blocks as a leader and an entrepreneur. I've spent 2 years working deeply with the nervous system with Jessica McGuire. I've got a really solid understanding of those more Western neuroscience, modern concepts of working with the body and the brain. So in sessions with me, we can look at business strategy or we can look at soul liberation, and using these different practices, working with the body and the brain to clear the blocks that are holding you back and really help you step into your brightest potential. If you want to learn more, the details are on my website, madelineeliza.com. You can send me a message or an email, and I'd love to chat with you. If not, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.